first one, first come, first served, so she's already filed. So I'll let Amber know.
Tell Amber.
Okay, I'd like to call the Budget Review Committee to order. It's September 5th, 2019. We're in the Aldermanic Chamber. It's 7:01 PM. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire.
Here.
Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present. Alderman at Large Ben Clemens.
Here.
Alderman Jan Schmidt.
Here.
Alderman at Large David Tenza.
Present.
Not in the, and Chairman Richard Dowd.
Thank you. Present.
Yes. Member not in attendance is Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
All right. Shoshana Kelly is either having or had a baby. It's that close, so she would not be able to be with us tonight. So the first item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to speak to anything on tonight's agenda? Seeing none. Communications.
One from Mayor Jim Donches, report on surplus and overlay 2020. Further communications from Mayor Donches, fiscal year 2020, like-for-like escrow. Further communication from John L. Griffin, Chief Financial Officer, reason R19-154, parking-related expenditures, expendable trust fund.
So if there's no objection, we'll waive the readings and place those on file. Unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions.
Before us this evening is R19-163, relative to supplemental appropriations of $1,500,000 of fiscal year 2019 unanticipated revenue from Department Number 126, Financial Services, Accounting Classifications, Number 45, Miscellaneous Revenue, into Funds Number 7026, Capital Equipment Reserve Fund. I would like to make an amendment to the motion. My amendment would be, I'd like to make the motion to reduce the amount of R19-163 to go to the SURF to $1,450,000 and to allocate the remaining $50,000 to Department 152 Fire in the account 5500. Other contracts to fund a comprehensive citywide fire coverage analysis. And I recommend final passage. May I speak to my motion?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's been quite a long time. I can't really come up with the exact date.
I can.
But it's been over 20-some-odd years since the fire department has had a comprehensive study such as this. Since that time, a lot of things have changed. I know the fire department has the dive team that did not really exist 20 years ago, other different things that come in. There's been talks for future stations and other things, and even looking at the complete structure of the fire department. This will bring us into, help us get the boys or our firefighters, the men and women that serve. This will allow them to have a study done that will probably enhance to our citizens what they expect out of the fire department. So I recommend that we pass this. Thank you.
Okay, just for additional information, the date of this report, which was the final report before, January 24th, 1986, 33 years ago.
Okay.
And you notice the pages are a little yellow from... What?
That's goldenrod.
Goldenrod?
It's just oldenrod.
Okay, so is there any discussion on the amendment? Alderman Clemens.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what that $50,000 was originally going to be used for. In other words, it's just going into the SURF account, but we weren't appropriating anything. Is that correct?
No, the $1.5 million was just to add money to the SURF account to bolster up the amount of money that's in there, which is kind of low, as we all know. And the $50,000 for this study will help the fire department determine going forward what types of vehicles that they should be acquiring, and that ties right into SURF.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand, okay.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We now have the amended R-19-163. We have the mayor and Mr. Griffin here. Would you like to address the money going to SURF, or?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the best thing to do would be, because this resolution, along with the succeeding resolutions, in other words, 19-164, 165, 167, 168, 169, and the escrow resolution are 19-170, as well as the resolution that you will see tomorrow, of which I have a copy tonight to direct 4.5 million to the tax rate. They all work together, because it's basically an overall plan to deal with the surplus. So if the committee goes along, I guess I would propose that I just talk about the entire package of things, give you an overview, and then the individual items could be discussed in that context.
I'll see if anybody has an objection, but it sounds reasonable, and then we'll address each resolution on a separate vote. But if you want to address the entire package right now, if nobody has any objections? Okay.
So every year, surplus consists of basically two items. Number one, money that was appropriated during the fiscal year, in this case fiscal 19, the year ending June 30, 2019, which was not expended, money that was appropriated but not expended. And the second major source of surplus is revenue, which exceeded the revenue projections in the budget. Now, Nashua has been traditionally very conservative with respect to especially revenue projections, because we have had a surplus every year for many, many years. And also, we try to be careful during the year to try to save money as against the appropriated funds, so that we can generate a surplus at the end of the year. And our custom has been, and this is following that custom and that procedure which has been followed over a number of years, is to reallocate unexpended funds into various purposes that the city wishes to achieve, as well as to allocate the revenue which exceeds the budget projections. So this year we had about $3 million of unexpended appropriations, and the reallocation of that money is dealt with in our 19-170, and we can talk through the details of what's in there. The various resolutions that you see before you, 63, 64, 65, 67, 68, and 69, as well as the resolution that we are introducing for tomorrow night for first reading, will propose the way to allocate the revenue surplus. As an overview, and I do have a copy of this new resolution that would propose that you'll see tomorrow in the packet, that proposes, it's R-19-174, that proposes first that the biggest amount of all this, $4.5 million, be allocated to reducing the tax rate. This is the same amount that we applied to the tax rate last year, and therefore we are tax neutral with respect to the money that we are devoting to buying down the tax rate. The other items are included in these various resolutions, but the vast majority of the money is directed into purposes which will save future tax, which will save taxes in the future. For example, beyond the saving of the beyond devoting $4.5 million to the tax rate, the next biggest item, which is an amount of $3 million, which is allocated in resolutions 164 and 165, would devote $3 million to the so-called self-insurance fund. Now, this is to backstop, this is to supplement the reserve account we have, the city has, to backstop our self-insured employee insurance system. So what we have is we are self-insured, and we have been self-insured for a long time. We do not pay premiums to an insurance company. We pay a small amount, relatively small amount to our total expenditure to a company, Anthem, to administer the benefits. But the benefits are paid for by just straight out city tax dollars. And the amount that the city spends every year is going to spend in a year is projected. But of course, we don't find out till the end of the year what that actual amount is, because insurance claims can vary, at least to some extent, from year to year. We, over time, have saved a lot of money being self-insured, because insurance companies, of course, set premiums. If we were working with an insurance company and buying insurance for each employee, they set a premium in a way that they make a profit on and they put extra money into account for any risk over and above what they really expect to pay in claims. So we've saved a lot of money doing this. But in order to make sure that it always works, we have an insurance fund. And Ms. Kleiner is here and can speak to the balance in that fund, but we want it to be at least $5 or $6 million or more, so that we always know that no matter what our projections are, and no matter how the expenditures come out at the end of the year, there will always be enough to pay the claims. Now, as you know, the insurance in this past year went up 11%. Our budgeted number went up 11% for between fiscal 19 and fiscal 20, because the experts we have are projecting that insurance claims during fiscal 20 will go up 11% from fiscal 19. And they're also telling us that insurance claims will go up significantly in future years as well. Maybe not 11%, but they're not expecting any years in which we'll see a very modest increase. So we want to make sure that the backstop is sufficiently funded, and we're proposing that $3 million go into the insurance backstop fund, or the self-insurance fund. Now we're taking some steps. We're taking as many steps as we can to try to keep these insurance claims down. First of all, we went from 2 to 1 administrators. We went solely to Anthem as opposed to Anthem and to Harvard Pilgrim, saving $400,000 or $500,000 a year just by doing that. Number 2, the Finance Committee approved the other night a smart shopper plan, which will enable our employees to look at the amount that the city would need to spend for various procedures, and to see the lowest cost procedure, where the lowest cost for that procedure might be obtained. And they get a certain economic benefit, a bonus, for adopting the lower cost approach. In talking with Manchester, for example, which has had this in place for a little while, a big area where savings can be realized through this smart shopper approach is on diagnostic tests, for example. Some independent labs will charge a lot less than hospitals, say, for a particular test, a diagnostic test. maybe a urinalysis or, whatever else gets done. And if for any of these procedures, the employee searches and figures out what the cheaper option is, less expensive option, and if they adopt it, they get a cash benefit so that the city gains and so do they. Manchester feels that this has helped them contain costs, and they're hoping to encourage even more use, and so we're adopting that for the first time this year. And if you want to hear more of the details, Ms. Kleiner is here to explain it. But we are taking we're taking steps to try to limit insurance costs. But again, we are back to our surplus. We're proposing that $1 million and $2 million be allocated into the insurance fund. A number of other items where we are saving future taxes is we're investing basically in projects where we're putting funds into savings accounts in many cases where we know we'll need to spend money in the future. For example, you just voted on, at least amended, Resolution R, or 19163, which is amended now to devote $1,450,000 to the SURF account, which is future purchase of capital equipment, the trucks, garbage trucks, dump trucks, buses, whatever, other things. And in addition to that $1,450,000, the resolution which allocates the unexpended revenues, that being 170, allocates another 1.2 into SURF for a total of $2,650,000. We did not budget much into that item during the regular budget. I think the number was actually $500,000. And so with these transfers, we would deposit into that account during this budget year a total of about $3,150,000, which will cover the equipment that is needed in the short term and hopefully save a little bit of money for the future. The other big items are $1 million into the middle school project, which we know is coming and we know is going to be expensive, proposing to put some money towards that so that they have money to begin to operate, maybe do some design, and save future tax money, save interest, save borrowing in the future. That is Resolution R19167. We are proposing that $300,000 be allocated to the Library Plaza project, which is a portion of the cost of that project, just to get phase one of that project off the ground, and you've seen the design for that. We're proposing basically that $700,000 go into, and this is R19169, go to Public Works for a couple of purposes. Number one, we know we have some serious problems at Lincoln Park with respect to the fact that the park is built on a landfill, and there's some instability. The road is a problem going in, as well as the playground is tilting to a point where we almost have to close it. So we would like to stabilize and equalize the level of the playground so people can continue to use it. This is something that Alderwoman Schmidt, I know, is concerned about, that Lincoln Park needs repairs and has for quite some time. And then the remainder of that money, and we don't know how much exactly Lincoln Park would cost, could be devoted to sidewalks. We've heard over the last number of months, especially if people have seen the roads be improved to the degree we've improved them, which is very considerable. what about the sidewalks? So we know we have sidewalks that are in terrible shape throughout the city, so this would put some money towards sidewalks. So that covers those resolutions and that make individual allocations of excess revenue. Remember again that the largest one is the 4.5 million that would go to the tax rate, and the second is the $3 million that would go to the backstop the city health benefits. Within our 19,170, contains the proposed reallocations of the unexpended money. Now again, most of those go into these various savings accounts. I already mentioned 1.2 into SURF. The next biggest item is 300,000 to put towards the either the improvement of or the consolidation of public works facilities. That's in the works now, so that would be $300,000 to get that project off the ground. There is $310,000 into the city building savings account, which enables us to pay for improvements to city buildings as those improvements are required. There's $140,000 that would go to the school capital reserve fund, which backstops improvements necessary to, as they come along, to our billion-plus investments in our city schools. There's $100,000 that goes into the reserve fund, the savings account, which backs up the hydro dams, so that if something goes wrong or improvements are necessary there, that is available to fix or repair or do whatever is necessary at the dams. And then the other larger one is $150,000 for the boat ramp. We've received a state grant to redo the boat ramp at the end of Hills Ferry Road, and that grant was $200,000. We've also appropriated some city money towards it, but it seems as though that is not that total of $400,000 is not likely to be able to complete the project. So this proposes that $150,000 be allocated to that to make sure we can actually complete the project. Probably it'll go out to bid this fall, but the bids will probably come in high, and we'll probably rebid it in the spring, but complete it during next calendar year. Now that's sort of an overview. Again, the largest items are the money going to the tax rate, the money going into the insurance fund, $3 million, the money going into SURF capital equipment, which is about $2.6 million, and then into some of these other savings accounts and to other future projects that we know we're really already committed to undertaking. So, Mr. Chair, I think that gives an overview. Obviously, we are available for any questions you have on any of the items I've mentioned or any of the other items that are included in any of these resolutions.
I think the most logical way to proceed is to address each one of the resolutions independently. If you have questions about that resolution or questions based on what you heard from the mayor, we'll address them at that resolution. So the first resolution is R19-164, and that's relative to $1 million from license and permits into the benefit insurance fund.
163.
It's just final passage.
Oh, final, sorry.
No, quite all right.
Skip right by that. So R19-163, it's final passage of the amended appropriation of $1,450,000 to SURF and $50,000 to the Department 152 Fire and account 5,500 other contracts. Any questions on that? Alderman Clements.
Thank you. So, my question is one of, I guess, historical reference, I guess, more from my point of view, which, or curiosity. So this was from unanticipated revenue from what exactly?
Well, various places, but the biggest by far is the automobile registrations. Now, if you go back, 30 or 40 years, the city has always been very conservative in projecting those revenues, and we've always had a healthy surplus as a result of the automobile registrations. This year was particularly the case. The autos were really selling. A lot of people registered cars. Mr. Fredette is not here, but I think he's spoken to some people about what's gone on with that. There was one guy who registered a McLaren or something, and we got 200,000 out of one vehicle. So,
Okay.
What ward is he in?
so, and I think that's what it was, and I think that was the number, but it was, very large automobile, and, anyway, so the biggest part of that, and John can give you CFO Griffin can give you maybe the actual number that, automobile registrations exceeded, but it was multiple millions. And that was the largest part of the $10 million of excess revenue.
Follow up, Alderman Clemmons?
So, was this revenue in this particular piece of, and I'm going to ask this on every one, so on this particular piece of legislation, was that revenue from fees, or was some of it taxes?
It's all from fees, because the tax revenue all goes into paying for the budget. For the tax money that you see in this group of resolutions, the tax money are the unexpended appropriations.
Okay.
Because we do not collect tax money in excess of what is necessary to pay for the budget. So say the budget was roughly 260, right? We pay 200, we collect $260 million, down to the dollar, the amount that is needed to pay for the budget. So to the extent that you do not spend all of the money that's appropriated in the budget, and you have that money left over, which in our case is about $3 million, that $3 million is derived originally from property tax money. That unexpended tax revenue is the reallocation of that unexpended, but appropriated, but unexpended, meaning it was proposed to be spent in one way or another, but it wasn't. That comes from many places.
And that's in the...
That's in Resolution 170.
Yeah, okay. So my question, I guess, then, and maybe we can just answer this on this one. Where in the past, were we restricted on this because of the spending cap? Would we have not been able to appropriate a lot of this because of the spending cap?
We would need 10 votes, and I think you still do, to increase an appropriation.
Okay.
Maybe I could, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Griffin?
Couple of things. I have had the luxury of being here since August of 2010, and as Alderman Clemmons indicated, we never really were able to do what we're doing today. My understanding would be if we exceeded the spending cap that is now unenforceable and doesn't exist anymore, you'd have to do exclusions of debt service or capital. So now that we don't need to do that, it's just a straight, as the mayor indicated, just a straight 10-vote supplemental appropriation of unanticipated revenue. Now, to kind of walk you through the process I went through, knowing what the number was that we wanted to appropriate, let's say the $1.5 million, I looked at automobile licenses and registrations, and the number was, the excess was in the $4 to $5 million range. So I used that for that particular number. On the school side, for example, the $1 million project, there was roughly $1 million, $1.1 million of excess or above budget, predominantly in the Medicaid area. So I used those amounts. They don't come out and tell you, and you probably need a follow-up, bit of information, but it's intergovernment revenue, so, so the school, I pegged to $1 million for the school, use the revenue for that, and then at the end of the day, as the mayor said, once we recommended the 4.5 of unanticipated revenue, we wanted to have about a $500,000 left to put 4.5 million against the tax rate. And that's the surplus. So you're starting with 9.75 million of excess revenue, not 5.25. 9.75
Got it.
minus these 4.5s, left with 5.25 million minus 4.5. We're going to grow the unassigned fund balance by 725,000, which keeps our percentage of unassigned fund balance at 11.6%, the way we've been calculating it since at least I've been here and probably a few years before that. You may recall, if you were here in 2008, one of the first ordinances in '08, O-0802, you raised the percentage to 10%. And we've always exceeded that. So very consistently kept that balance, the percentage the same, and grow the unassigned fund balances, which is what the rating agencies find attractive and give us the AAA ratings.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
Now, what has been done in the past, rather than appropriate these things into a particular savings account, for example, like SURF or one of these others, money was added to a line assigned fund balance, which is part of the fund balance the city is carrying, assigned to a particular purpose. That was not considered to be an appropriation. So money was saved that way as opposed to within the budget, within the fund balance, while the spending cap was in effect. So that was a different way of saving money. But it was done in a different way while the spending cap was still effective and enforceable.
Alderman Clements, you want to follow up?
Yes, thank you. So, thank you for the explanation. I appreciate that. And I'm sure the public does as well, because it gives a good insight into why it seems, or why this is a little bit done differently. My only other question that I had was for another resolution, so I'll keep it. I'll stick to this.
Any other questions for this resolution, Alderman Tenza?
So, sorry, Mr. Chairman, if I may just ask a general question about the appropriations that are being proposed. How is it that you came up with, either the mayor's office or Chairman Dowd? Obviously the city has a lot of unfunded needs. Why were these appropriations sought as opposed to others? Were there others that you wanted to fund but couldn't or considered?
Yeah, of course, but these seemed the most critical. It seemed to be kind of allocating things to different projects that we know, some to public work, some to the school, some to city buildings, some to SURF. I mean, to kind of allocate the money in a way that would improve us in a number of areas. But are there other places we could have put the money? Sure. I could name a lot of them right now, but one footnote, and just to go back, this $100,000 item, which I know some people are concerned about, so I want to make sure you know about it. Within the R19-170, there's $100,000 of police overtime, which is another savings account, which is used to backstop the police department when they have like big crimes or things like this that cause a huge amount of overtime all at one time. And that's what's used to that, and that's an account that's down to $80,000 or something like that. So this would bring it up to 180. But back to Alderman Tenz's questions, yeah, I mean there are a lot of things we could spend money on. More money on sidewalks. We could pay for the in total the Library Plaza project, or we could pave more. Well, we're kind of at maxing out as far as paving streets, but we could put more money into the school project. We could do the roof of the Court Street building. We could we could go on and on. We could put more money into we could buy some land and build a park. There's a lot of things we could do.
So I can say that, by the way, the police department, the 100,000 was one of their most important. The things that have been allocated are some of the most important things that the departments themselves have lobbied for. So that's pretty much how the list gets made every year. Any additional question, Alderman
But
Tenzer?
back to the Alderman Tenz's question. So, but some of this is reflected on the priorities that we believe the Board of Aldermen has expressed. I mean, it's pretty clear we're going to go ahead with the middle school project in one form or another, right? So we put $1 million there. Could it have been $1.5 million? Yeah, it could be, any number because we know it's going to cost a lot. We know that over time, the Board of Aldermen has, of course, expressed a considerable concern that we always keep up with capital equipment purchases, that we not let the equipment really run down. So there's $2.6 million to that account. Obviously, we don't want the health money to run out. So we want to make sure that remains a healthy system. So there's $3 million there. I mean, so some of these are kind of obvious. Others are, I think, reflected in kind of a group consensus that's been formed in the past about up to now regarding the priorities, the general priorities that we have. But could the numbers be varied? More here and less there? Yeah. But so it's just, I guess, my judgment or our judgment as to what the best place to put it is. But someone else could say they think it should be a little different.
All set, Alderman Tenzer, or you have a follow-up?
One follow-up, because a lot of questions that people have had for me about the surplus obviously revolves around people think that it can either be returned to individual taxpayers or credited towards next year's budget. Let's say it's credited and applied towards next year's budget. Is that going to affect the budget at all? Is it going to affect how would it affect these projects going forward?
Well, the thing that hasn't been very clearly, we never proposed it until now, just because that's the way it happened. But 4.5 is going to buy down this year's tax rate. Now, all of these projects affect next year's budget in the sense that, or future year's budget in the sense that if we put $1 million towards the middle school project, that's $1 million we don't have to come up with later. If we put $2.6 million to capital equipment, that's $2.5 million we don't have to appropriate next year. So that's towards next year's budget. And you could say that about a lot of things. $100,000 to police overtime. If we got to run the police department, they've got to operate 24 hours a day. We have to investigate murders. And this police department overtime account developed when they had 2 or 3 murders right at the beginning of the fiscal year. This was the year, there were 2 or 3 different serious crimes, and they were running out of overtime right at the beginning of the year. Overtime had to be used to investigate these 24-hour, everybody's on duty kind of crimes. So we wanted to make sure they can always operate and have enough to do the very good job that they do. So in a way, that 100,000 just makes sure that we don't have to allocate, if something happens and goes wrong, we don't have to appropriate extra money next year or later this year. we're just making sure that we don't have to make some kind of emergency transfer in the future. So most of these things are directed to saving tax money in the future.
There's a couple points, like, it's for instance, the police overtime accounts not too far dissimilar from the special revenue account we have for plowing. If you have a normal winter, the budget can cover it. If you have a very severe winter and there's a lot of extra plowing, they don't have to come back to us and allocate money from the additional money from the current year budget, which was a lot more problematic when the spending cap was there. And so this allows them to have the flexibility if something happens. That goes forward. I think there was one other thing Alderman, you all said, Alderman?
Thank you.
Oh, the other point I was gonna make is, some people had asked, can we apply all this money to the tax rate? Well, bring the tax rate way down. You can, but what would happen is these things that we have to expend money on would all hit later. And 2 years from now, the tax rate might be 6 or 7%, and I'm sure nobody around this circle wants that to happen. Alderman Clements.
Yeah, I was just gonna make that point, the first number really was the number that you needed to get the tax rate to 3%, because that was my next question, was I assume that the 4.5 million is going to get the tax rate to 3%. Is that correct?
Correct.
So
Actually,
really,
slightly
that's
under.
well, really, that's the first that's the first number, and then everything else is from there. Yeah, I mean, how much? What is the percentage that? In other words, if we didn't apply the 4.5 million, what would it have gone to? What would the tax rate be?
That buys it down about 2%. Because it's about 2.1 million per percent on the tax rate. So it's about a little over 2. So if we didn't do this, it would be 5. But again, we applied the same amount last year. So if you get into the habit of, if you get into putting too much money towards the tax rate, you can create a hole that you have trouble digging out of the next year. For example, when the year that the pension increases hit, in the state pension system, just to remind people, we do not negotiate pensions. This was extra costs imposed by the state of New Hampshire. So we extra millions of dollars extra in pensions and some other things that were fixed cost increases. There was a year when we applied $7.1 million to the tax rate. And we kept the tax rate under 3, but we applied 7.1. Now, we've kind of been digging out of that a little bit in the last couple of years, because the next year, if you don't have that extra revenue, if you don't have $7.1 million, then, let's say you only have 5, now the tax rate goes up $2 million or $3 million without you doing anything, with no budget increase, with nothing, because you're not able to replace the amount that you put towards the tax rate. So it's kind of an art to apply enough that you come in with a reasonable tax rate and kind of do about what you did last year. But on the other hand, not so much that you in the end cause a big spike in the tax rate. And also, I mean, what a $4.5 million figure does for us is if something went really wrong next year and we wanted to keep the tax rate to a more reasonable level, we could, if we can come up with a revenue, if we do 6.5, if something goes wrong, we still have room to do that. So, it sort of reflects the idea that kind of a stable tax rate rather than one that goes down and then goes way up and goes down and goes up, that it is better for people to have, some level of dependability, that the tax rate's not going to go through the roof ever, is what we're trying to achieve.
And when we set the 2020 budget, we knew, or the mayor knew, and the finance officer knew, that we would have at least that amount of money to put towards the tax rate to keep it under 3%. We've done it every year, so it's not like, oh, all of a sudden we gonna allocate 4.5 million to keep it under 3%. That was planned. But they don't know the final number on revenues till the entire budget year is closed out. Now we have to allocate the excess money. So, did you have a follow-up, Alderman Clements?
No, just to say that I completely agree with what's been said, and I was just curious what 4.5 million bought it down by. But I would like to say too that, you know, you hear some people say, you know, why don't we do more in trying to keep the tax rate down? But the issue is that we do quite a bit, and I think this is although it looks like we're spending money, most of this stuff is going into accounts that are going to save us money in the future because they're expenses we know are going to happen. You know, so we can either pay it now with extra money that we have already in our wallets that we've already taken from people, or we can ask for it later. So it's, in my opinion, this is a very good balance.
Okay, Alderman O'Brien.
Yeah, I just want to comment that I agree with this, and I'm glad that you're putting the money into the SURF account. It's something that, to me, that has always been the unwanted sister financially. Maybe with the spending cap, we didn't have that much funds to actually put in it, and for many, many years, it was pretty much underfunded. And the intention of the SURF is to get these reoccurring costs that come up in the future, you know, such as, you know, we're going to need a new dump truck for BPW or a plow or something like that. There's got to be vehicles that are going to get into accidents and different things that are going to need to be replaced. And because of some of these structured type of replacements or, you know, emergency replacements, the projects usually came out of the SURF account. And so I'm glad that this money is going in because it does save the taxpayers, I think, money. That's the intention of SURF. As we get farther along down, we're putting money in for future spending that we may need to keep the city running. And right now, I know we're purchasing some equipment, such as in the example of fire trucks, through bonding. And I really don't know how long the sweetheart deals on bonding is going to exist. Maybe with the way this economy may potentially go. So I could see that climate changing where we might have to revert back to all purchases into with the SURF account. I think this fills a little bit of the pit that has existed in SURF, and I think money here is well chosen because it does come back when we have to do these very large purchases, you know, for like dump trucks and things like that, that will help that go along and be better for the taxpayer, you know. And if you want to comment, Mr. Griffin, on the crystal ball where the bonds are going, I don't know. I haven't got the crystal ball
It'd be
either.
in Wall Street, but.
Yeah. So I'm hoping a lot of the general questions on several of these resolutions have been answered because we have several resolutions to go through. And if there's no more discussion on this particular resolution,
Mr. Chair,
oh,
I did have a question. for the mayor.
Alderman Lopez.
So one of the reasons I'm here tonight, because I'm not a committee member, is because of the article in the Telegraph last week that was talking about how the school district is being investigated at the federal level as to whether or not we're doing our ESOL adequately and appropriately. I talked to the president of the Board of Education, Heather Raymond, to get a better idea of that. Alderman Schmidt was with me. And basically, she believes we're going to have to add an additional 9 ESOL teachers in order to bring the ratios down and also to make sure all the schools that are in need are being served. We had earlier this year reserved enough for 4 ESOL teachers in the contingency fund. 3 of those are filled, 1 of them isn't, because it's split over 2 sites, and so the 9 would be in addition to that. So in discussions with the mayor and in trying to figure out a way that we can address the needs of ESOL students and the school district, but not do it in a way where we have to try to handle everything all at once, I wanted to suggest out of the escrow accounts that we take enough for one additional ESOL student. That last ESOL role, it's my understanding that the reason it's difficult to fill is because it's at 2 locations. So basically, by adding another ESOL, we would be able to staff 2 locations and create 2 jobs for the price of, for the impact of 1. And I had talked to the mayor about the escrows, but I wanted to ask before all of these amendments get made, would it make more sense to look at pulling that from some other place or be less impactful?
So Alderman Lopez and I discussed this, and at least, I'm convinced that it would be worthwhile providing the money for an additional ELL teacher. Now, where this could come from is if you look in the detail on R 19170,
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but can we talk about that when we get there?
we could, but there's a place here where there's something has changed, which has made one of the expenditures really unnecessary, so we could use that money for the school department if that was your pleasure.
So
But
that
when-
answers my question then.
we can
because
get
I
to
didn't want to
that.
go through all these motions and then find out we just
Yeah.
missed an opportunity.
Yeah. Now, can I add one, in response to Alderman Clemmons and the tax rate? I would like to remind people that Nashua, as compared with other cities in New Hampshire, has a very low tax rate. We are the second lowest of all the cities, Manchester, Concord, Rochester, Dover. The only one lower than Nashua is Portsmouth, which I say is a special situation because property values there have gone, it costs $700,000 to buy a house. And so they're not paying less taxes. Their rate is lower and their property values are very high. Their rate is like 16 or something like that. But in any event, okay, so they're lower, but all of the others are higher than Nashua. So the taxpayers in Nashua, we are a very property tax reliant state more than any other state. So property taxes, yes, are high, but that's the system we're operating in. And the legislature, the House, has tried to improve that situation, and they're fighting to do that, and we'll see. But in any event, I think Nashua taxpayers get good value for the taxes they do pay, at least within the New Hampshire system, as compared with other cities across the state of New Hampshire.
So for our 19163, all those in favor of the amended resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we're on to R 19164, which is the first of the 2 benefits for self-insurance fund. The first one is for $1 million. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is R 19165, relative to $2 million from the assigned fund balance into Fund 6600 benefits and self-insurance. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. R 19167, which is $1 million from intergovernmental revenue into school capital project, district-wide school improvement renovations, i.e. the middle school project. On this particular motion, I'd like us to approve this, subject to the findings of the CIC committee, because the revenues have to be allocated fairly quickly, and rather than prolong this, we would like to do it contingent upon CIC finding this is a viable project. And I hope they do. If there's no concern or questions, then this will be subject approval of the Capital Improvements Committee. Any questions? Alderman Clemmons.
So so are you amending it, or?
No,
is
it's
it-
just that there was a footnote that it said was sending it to Capital Improvements Committee as well. Sometimes when it's going to another committee, we
Oh,
put it on
oh,
a
oh.
table until it comes
Yeah,
back.
yeah,
But in
yeah.
this instance, we'd like to approve it away, because the CIC is just going to put a rating on it,
Got it. Yep.
okay? Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. R19-168, this is subject to the $300,000 of unanticipated revenue going into the 14 court. I don't believe this one even has to go to CIC, does it, Mr. Griffin? Did we discuss that?
Yeah, John Griffin, CFO. This one actually does because this is
Okay.
not Court Street. This is the plaza between Court Street Building and the library.
Sometimes the definition isn't exactly. So this one, I would also suggest that the motion be that we approve pending the outcome of the Capital Improvements Committee. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. R19-169, this is the one that didn't need, right? Correct. Okay, this doesn't need to go to CIC anyway. So it's relative to supplemental appropriation of $700,000 of FY 2019 unanticipated revenue from Department 126 Financial Services Accounting Classification Number 42, Licenses and Permits Revenue into the Public Works Capital Project Activity Infrastructure Improvements Citywide. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. R19-170 is relative to the reappropriation of fiscal year 2020 escrows. I'm going to make the assumption that everybody has seen the list. Are there any questions? Alderman Clements.
Yeah, this is where I would like to see where the mayor had a suggestion for the ESL teachers.
Ah, you're breaking up.
Okay, so if you, in the second section, you see airport is the first item there, and it's to fund a portion of the airport's 5% match for an FAA project. Now, as a surprise to the airport, they did not get that grant. This is this is something that we've done every year, trying to get the airport these funds or to provide the local match, because it's with state and local, with state and federal, it's 19-1. We pay only 5%. So this was repaving a portion of the apron and all this kind of thing. It was really quite a large project, but for whatever reason, the airport did not get the FAA grant this year. So there's no need for the match. Now, I believe, it seems as though they may get the grant next year, and they may get a planning grant this year, a design grant, but there is some money in the regular budget that would be more than sufficient to cover the match for that, because that's like a $200,000, not a $3 million thing. So we don't really need the $69,000 at this time. It might come up again next year, hopefully, if they get the grant then, but we could reallocate that money into the ELL teacher.
So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we can hire an ELL teacher for less than $69,319. And that would be a motion to amend our 19-170 from the, is that the mayor, coming out of the mayor's, no, airport contingency? Airport contingency, change that to the school department to fund an additional ELL teacher. Somebody like to make that motion?
So moved.
So Alderman Clements has moved to change that line on our 19-170 to the school department to hire an ELL teacher. Now, one of my concerns is that you said they've already hired 3. They were supposed to return to this board to have the contingency released, so they're out on their own nickel at the moment. I'll have to talk to President Raymond about that. They should be coming back and asking us to release the money from contingency.
I think you will see, I believe, a resolution proposed to give them that transfer, I think on tomorrow's, or Tuesday's agenda. If
Yeah.
not, it would be the
You
following
had said
weeks. So
tomorrow
that's
a
in the
couple
week.
times, and like, trust me, on Friday, nobody's gonna
Yeah.
be here.
Yeah. So, but that comes out in the packet tomorrow.
Yes.
You see, I think it's in the packet. If not, we would do it, but
Okay.
since they've hired the teachers, we simply should make the transfer to them. They obviously have enough cash to meet current needs, so if we transfer it to them in the next month or so,
So-
that'll be no problem.
I would make the motion general enough to include the entire 69,000. They still have enough for half another ELL teacher, and this may give them enough, maybe for two. I don't know what they go for these days, but it would at least give them some leeway there.
Intern.
Yeah. I mean, they're still woefully short on ELL teachers, but that will help. So is that your motion, Alderman Clemmons?
Yes, so moved.
Does the clerk have that all set? So the amendment motion on the floor on R 19-170 is to change the funds in the fiscal year escrows from allocation to a portion of the FAA project for the airport to the school department, which is the account number is escaping me. The $69,319 for ELL. And do you want to make that entered into contingency or just leave that as is?
We'll just give it,
Okay,
and if I could speak to that,
yes.
it's a trust test, right? So we'll, cause the whole reason for putting the, 200,000 in contingency was that we worry about them going and turning around and funding something else. So I think, hopefully they do the right thing here, but I'm gonna go out on a limb and,
Just asking to make sure everybody is clear on that.
yep.
Alderman Clee,
I just have a question relative to that. If you did give that to them and it didn't go into a contingency and they don't hire, would they then be able to use it for whatever they want?
Yes.
Is that
they
correct?
could, but if they don't hire an ELL teacher, they're in bigger trouble.
Got it, thank you.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, and then it's gonna be a lot harder for them to come to us for stuff like this.
In the future. Any other discussion on this motion, with the amendment? So the motion is on the amendment. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we're at the amended R 19-170 for reappropriation of fiscal year FY 2020 escrows. Any other discussion? Alderman Clemmons?
I just want to make a comment, and that's, Mayor, if you could have just told me the night of the budget that you would have put the $100,000 into contingency for the police, and that we would have put 50,000 towards that fire program, I probably would have voted for the budget, but I understand you couldn't do that at the time, but I'm glad that we're doing it now, so I just wanted to tell you I appreciate that.
In fairness to the mayor, they didn't have the number on the revenues.
I know, but
Yeah, I agree, you should have voted for the budget.
Ooh,
but
Perfect answer. What he said.
okay. If there's no further discussion, this is for the amended R 19-170, the reappropriation of FY 2020 escrows with a change to the ELL, the school department. All in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next items are items that were tabled in committee. First of all, new business ordinances.
There is none.
Tabled in committee, the first is R 18-102, approving the cost items of a collective bargaining agreement between the National Board of Police Commissioners and the UFPO Local 645 professional employees of the National Police Department from July 1st, 2018 through June 30th, 2022, and authorizing related transfers. Do I have a motion to take it from the table?
I'll make the motion to remove R 18-102 from the table.
Okay, the motion is from Alderman O'Brien to take R 18-102 from the table. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I assume there are people here that have something more to do than just attend our meetings. Yes,
Can I make a motion?
why don't you let them sit first?
Okay.
Take any open seat. So before we introduce you, Alderman Wilshire wants to make a motion or a statement?
I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage of R 18-102 as amended.
As amended, we don't,
What's the
Well, what's
amendment?
the amended version?
oh,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So does everybody have a copy of the amended version?
Was that part of the budget agenda?
It was put out, I sent it all out to everybody
Oh, it was on a separate email. yeah.
through Sue Lovering. Anyway, I'm sure they're going to talk to it.
Yeah.
So, motion on the floor is to approve the amended R 18-102. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Well, can
Oop.
can we discuss it first?
Well, we can amend it and discuss the amended version.
Well,
Or
I-
do you want to discuss what wasn't amended and then,
Yeah, we should discuss the bill as amended and what it's gonna do before we vote on it.
okay, so the motion on the floor is to amend R 18-102, discussion. And I think it might behoove us to have them explain exactly what the bill is and what the amendment is, and then we can have a better, more logical discussion, hopefully.
Yes, I agree.
Chief, or who wants to speak?
Thank you, Alderman Dunn. Just to clear up some confusion, about a year ago, I brought
So you clarified, if you could just give your name and title so that the people doing the stenography know who's talking.
my name is Michael Carignan, Carignan, Chief of Police, Nashville Police Department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to review briefly, I brought this contract about a year ago to this committee. We had it approved by the National Board of Police Commissioners. We had brought it to the budget review where it was passed unanimously, and after that, some issues had come up, which is what the amended version is today. So I believe, if I understand correctly, I'm going to speak to what those changes were, but I'd also like to highlight if the committee would prefer what all the changes are. So basically go over the entire thing, and I'll point out what was amended. If
That's
that's
fine.
fair. Thank you.
great.
Basically, this union is the UFPO, Local 645, what was formerly known as the United Auto Workers, UAW union. They changed. So a lot of the changes in the contract, you're going to see the first 4 or 5 items were mostly word changes, basically changing over the names and some of the language in it. They were non-cost items. The first item that we're looking to change for this contract was an increase in vacation days. As you can see in the amendment, or in the contract itself, number 0 to 4 years added 2 days, 5 to 9 years added 2 days, 10 to 14 years added 2 days, 15 to 19 years of service was added 1 day. There was no change to 20 to 29 years, and after 30 years of service, there was 1 day added to 30 days per year. There was also some language changes for previously approved sidebars based on how we accrue the vacation time. Holidays, they were given an additional holiday, which was 12 holidays per year. There was also short-term disability added. This was at the employee's expense, was at no cost to the city. Article 17, which is the article that has been amended, I will give you both versions, what we had changed and why we had changed it. Initially, it was presented to be the 720 hours could be paid out upon retirement. That is a benefit that every other union in the National Police Department has, and I was trying to level them all out and make them the same. There was some concerns about that process expressed to me. As a result of that, I was asked to table it for the time being and see if we could reapproach with the union and possibly work out a negotiated agreement. So we spent about a year compromising, talking through compared to what some of the other union heads had. Previously, they were given 20%. There was a portion, 8 members of the union were given 20% of their buyout. They could accrue unlimited hours and get 20% of that upon retirement. The other 7 members of the union who were basically grandfathered in were allowed to accrue 720 hours and cash out the 100% of that. As an agreement, a negotiated agreement, what I did was previously giving them 20%, I changed it to 35%, not to ever exceed a total of 720 hours. So if the employee uses sick time and some of the other benefits in here affect that, they may never reach that 720-hour maximum. But if they did, they would get 35% instead of the 20% at the time of retirement. And I can explain that more. I would imagine there'll be some more questions regarding that in a minute. Just to highlight the rest of the items on the contract, bereavement leave, there was one additional bereavement day added for the death of a parent, step-parent, spouse, child, or stepchild, to a total of 4 days for those family members. Personal days, previously, they had 3 personal days that were not from sick and 2 personal days that were not from sick. We changed it from 3 personal days that didn't come out of sick to 2 personal days not from sick, which in my mind was basically a free day. What I was trying to do is get that time out of their sick time, so we moved it from 2 personal days to 4 personal days, all coming out of their sick time. Now, thinking back to what we just talked about, that would make those figures lower in the long run because they would be using those personal days, so those would not be accrued time to be paid out later, which would lower the risk of them accruing that total amount of time. The wage increases for them was 2.25, 2.5, 2.25, and 2.5. My approach to this contract, folks, I was trying to be very respectful, and the UAW or UFPO was in agreement, and they worked well with me to try to keep within, at the time, what the spending cap was anticipated to be. That was at the time when it was in the court process and it was being, evaluated by the courts. So we were being very respectful. The mayor had asked that we come within, try to keep that. He was trying real hard to keep all of our budgets under that cap, regardless of whether or not it was approved. So we tried to honor that. I tried to find other ways in the contract that didn't really have much to offer to give these folks the benefits while keeping the wages low. If for those of you who don't know, the union body here consists of 16 members, and they are basically the professionals and the supervisors. There are attorneys, there are IT specialists, and they are the managers of the civilian personnel within the National Police Department. The other items were longevity was already approved through a sidebar. Some overtime flex time was previously approved for a sidebar. If you recall, that was due to the scanning project that we had been ongoing, trying to take some of the documents, getting them on the computer, allowing some salaried employees to be able to get overtime for jobs that were not within their job description. Educational reimbursement, Article 37. This is a new feature in their contract. Associate's degree, 500, bachelor's degree, 1,000, master's degree, 1,250. Again, fairly consistent with other contracts within the National Police Department. And that's pretty much it for any of the cost items. I'd be happy to answer any questions or explain the reasoning for the decisions that we had made.
Just before we go too far, just to give my contract overview. The Board of Aldermen can only address cost items and agree or not agree with cost items, and can either approve or disapprove the entire contract, but we can't negotiate any of the terms because that's up to police commissions and whoever the negotiating team is. So just wanted to point that out. And now, Mayor, would you like to?
All right, well, I'm going to have to disagree with my friends from the police department with respect to several of the contract provisions. I don't have any problem with the wage increases that were negotiated. This is a civilian union. We're giving them, they've agreed to 2.5 and 2 1/4 over a period of 4 years per year. I don't have any problem with any of that. I think it's in line with other contracts and in line with the cost of living. Where I differ is in several of the non-salaried items, principally and primarily the increase in the sick time buyout, which occurs at the end of the career upon the departure of the employee. Now, it is true that our uniform services police and fire get 720 hours, and that remains in the police patrolman's contract, remains in the fire contract. But the city has been engaged in a decades-long effort to reduce, not to increase, sick buyouts for unused sick time. That decades-long effort is reflected in this contract, because this contract says that employees hired after September 2003, I believe is the year and the month, will receive 20% of their entire sick leave accrual, will be paid out that amount upon retirement or departure. That was a negotiated reduction for those employees back in 2003. Previous employees were grandfathered and they get the full 720 hours. But for those employees hired after 2003, the negotiation back then was to reduce it to 20% of their accumulated sick days upon retirement. Now this is, and again, that was done, 16 years ago. This would retroactively go back and increase the benefit from, almost double it, from 20% to 35%, and would mean an increase in the unfunded liability that the city has for, to buy out, pay for unused sick time. Now, this is a group of only 10 people, but the Board of Aldermen granted a retroactive increase in a much more complicated situation where there was a retroactive change. You recall all that. Okay, there was at least the rationale that a change had been made retroactively. But still, for City Hall employees hired after about 2001, it is only 20%. It's not 35, it's not 720 hours. And I think most importantly, the teachers, our largest group of civilian employees, over a period of several contracts, have gradually reduced this from a very large number, $38,000 a person, to 40% of accumulated, to I think 30% for a certain group, and for new hires, 20%. So the school department has been involved in a multi-year, multi-contract, decades-long effort to reduce these payouts. And the entire city has been involved in negotiating these contracts in multiple departments. And yes, not all contracts are equal, not the same amount of change or progress has not been made, but generally speaking, with respect to civilian employees, it has been reduced to, through negotiations, to 20%. Now, if we begin to reverse that trend for one group and then another and then another, what do we tell our largest group of civilian employees, the teachers, why they can't get 35%? I mean, they've agreed to 20. Why can't they get 35? Why can't City Hall? And if everyone went to the 720, the unfunded liability is $60 million. So there's a lot of employees. This is only 10. The last group was only 15. This is 10. But I get that negotiations are difficult. I mean, the chief is faced with this union saying, well, someone else in our department gets 720 hours, so I should get it. But you think the teachers and other civilian groups aren't aware of that same negotiating tactic? They will say, the civilians in the police department went to 35, why can't we? And what's the answer? What's the answer? Well, because there were some other guys in the police department. Well, at least right now, 720 applies to uniformed officers who put themselves, in harm's way. The rest of us, civilian employees, don't do that. And so we have negotiated across the civilian workforce some significant changes beginning with the Streeter administration, through the Lozo administration, now, my administration. And I don't think we should start to turn back the clock and go back 20 years and restore benefit, but these sick leave buyouts that were negotiated away almost 20 years ago. Therefore, I'm not in favor of this contract. The other things, increasing holidays, more vacation time, et cetera. I mean, I'm not in love with all that, but my main objection is this retirement issue. Again, if we do this for everyone, ultimately we will be facing, the city as a whole, over time, a $60 million unfunded liability.
All set?
Yes.
Would
You
the-
understand my thinking, I think.
Would the police commissioner or the police chief like to address a follow-up?
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Sure.
Mr. Chairman, I understand the mayor's perspective, and I completely respect where he's coming from and what he's saying. I will say this regarding this contract. Going into negotiation for this contract, I had no guidance, none. I had corporate counsel from the city with me, letting us know what's legal and what's not legal, making sure the things that we were proposing were above board. Other than that, we had no guidance. My guidance going in was strictly to try to respect what the mayor wanted to do, to come under the spending cap. I tried to do that. I did that, trying to get creative with other methods. I understand the logic about other agencies throughout the city, and I understand as a big picture what he's trying to say. However, I'm concerned with my police department. There are 8 people in my police department that will not have this benefit. Those 8 people's subordinates all will have those benefits. Long-term cost, if I get the costing sheet, if I understand it correctly, we were given the costing sheet, a hypothetical worst case, assuming nobody gets sick, assuming people work their entire career, 40 years for the National Police Department, assuming they don't go out on any long-term illnesses, family medical leaves, or anything like that, would be an additional $35,750 by 2059. Those figures all come not at the same time. This is assuming not every civilian in this union, all 8 people, will retire at the same time. I think that when I negotiate my contracts, I'm trying to get all of my department as close and like as I can. Moving forward, if the city has some special things that they want to try to get us to go after, let me know. I'll talk about it with my commission, and we'll go forward from there. I don't think this is unreasonable given what the subordinates have of these supervisors. I think it's a fair and reasonable contract. These are our specialists. These are our attorneys that are dealing with more and more caseloads involving mental health issues, involving more complex dangerousness hearings that require attorney specialties. Our computer IT specialists were under threats from cyber attack. Senator Hassan was just talking yesterday how severe cyber attacks are coming against city governments and city entities. So we have an IT unit that has these supervisors, and these are the people that are running that. So my point is, I absolutely think they're worth it. In the big picture of my department, for 8 people not to have this benefit, I think is unreasonable. I don't think it's too much to ask over 40 years to spread out an additional $35,000, assuming they keep that time. And the last point I'll make is, given that I'm trying to get creative in the way that I give the contract and they say, okay, we'll give you your personal days, we'll take them away as free days and take them out of your sick time. So that reduces that amount of the sick hours that they're using. So I am trying to make slow chip away efforts to get those reduced down so those numbers aren't as high and they don't have such a high cash out after 40 years of service with the National Police Department.
I would can I add one more thing on the cost? So what CFO Griffin did is he projected based on the current habits. Some people don't use sick time. But if everybody maxed this benefit, the increased cost I think the total cost would be $200 and some thousand against the current cost of about 70. So it'd be, if everybody maxed, it would be more like 150,000, very rough figures. If everyone maxed, went to the 720, it would be more like 150,000 for these 8 employees. Now, as this employee group grows, as people who've been grandfathered retire, then the number of these employees will go up. I mean, if someone were to retire tomorrow, it would become 9 or 10. I mean, that's how these grandfathered provisions work. But we've got, I mean, the teachers could come back to us and say, look, I mean, there's teachers in our department who are still grandfathered, so why shouldn't we get what they got? But that was negotiated away for people hired after a certain date. That's the only way the savings could be realized. In any event, I don't mean to repeat myself, but are we really going to unravel all that's been done over the last almost 20 years? And that concludes, I won't speak again, but I think my feelings on this are clear.
Commissioner Dolna, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would just reiterate, I mean, the chief did a very good job in explaining the details of the contract. I would say throughout this process, we've met a number of times with city officials, given direction as far as trying to do our best to keep it at the cap or under. And that's what we did. I understand the concerns that the mayor brings up as far as, going forward, but the situation that the commissioners were looking at is we actually have and it's been said, so I'll repeat it. We actually will have supervisors that will be managing people. And those people that he or she is managing will have richer benefits and opportunities than they will. And the two positions that we have for the attorneys, I have to compliment the chief, who was the deputy chief at the time, how we were able to, to put that together. And as far as thinking outside the box, I think, as was mentioned, using personal days that would come out of the sick bank is another way that we try to address or control expenses, overhead expenses going forward.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Alderman Clements, I would have been disappointed if you hadn't.
Was this contract agreed to unanimously by the police commission?
Yes, it was. And the budget committee, a number of months ago, right?
Other questions? Follow up, Alderman Clements?
Yeah, I understand what the Mayor Donchis is saying in regards to the unraveling of things, but I look at the police department as a little bit different in the sense that you have a group of people who are working towards one common goal, and they're all there to support one another in different ways. And the civilian workers there are probably the ones I would imagine that are the glue that binds most together, in the sense that, if you have attorneys working for you, if you have, they probably touch every police officer, in other words, in one way or another. So, to me, it's not unreasonable to want to have these benefits be the same across the board. And maybe they made a mistake back in 2003. I don't know. But I'll certainly support the contract. I think it's good, and I think I think you did a good job trying to keep it under what was the spending cap.
Any other comments, questions? Alderman Tenzo?
So, I had the experience of working for the county for a number of years, and the county's sick leave policy is that, quite frankly, you can take as much sick time as you want, as you needed, because they didn't give you any sick time, because I think, basically they didn't want to pay people out once they retired. And I fear that as we keep having these discussions about, sick leave and how we're going to, what kind of benefit people are going to get upon leaving the city, we're kind of going to be heading in that direction, which I don't think is the right direction to be heading in. I think we should have a sick time policy, and I think that a 20% benefit of accrued time at the end of people's service to the city is a fair and reasonable number. I know a lot of the people who are affected by this contract. I would be more inclined, and I know that the chief is cognizant of the numbers. I would be more inclined to support a increase in pay for them over an extended period of time, rather than a payout benefit increase. I think it makes sense. I think it, is paying them for the service they're rendering to the city on a daily basis. So I have concerns about the slippery slope we're on with this continued conversation on retirement benefits and sick leave and how it all relates.
Any other comments? Oh, Alderman Clee.
Just to muddy the waters a little bit, as a federal employee, one of the things that they do with sick leave benefits, you do not get paid for it at the end. So people were tending to use it up. But what they do is for every 30 days, basically you have a month's worth of hours. It was added to your retirement. So if you had 15 years and then 30 days, you had 30 days of sick leave, you had 15 years and 1 month. It's not as much of a cost. It just adds to your time, which gives you a different change as to how much you get in your benefits. So it's just another way of creatively looking at it.
Yes, Chief.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I don't believe that we would be able to do that because our retirement system is dictated by the state. So I don't think that time would be counted in there. I'd have to check and get a legal opinion, but I believe that's it. If I may respond to Alderman Tenza?
Sure.
While I appreciate your argument about sick time and your argument about paying them more money up front as opposed to them taking sick time, I think it seems illogical to me because you want to pay them more money for them not to be there, for them to take a sick day. In this day of awareness of mental health and the importance of mental health, people are taking more time when we, maybe a different generation, wouldn't have taken the sick time. They're taking it because they just don't feel they need a mental health day. They need a day to get their head straight. So they're taking that time. So that's all time that they're not there being worked, and yet we're paying them more money for it. So it's something I considered. It's something we looked at, and that's just how I feel about it moving in. Thank you.
Follow up, Alderman Tenza?
And so, my concern actually would, partially with this policy, is that people don't take the days because they're trying to accrue the benefit later on for the payout. So if people need to take sick days, I'd rather them take sick days. And by capping it at 20%, I think it incentivizes them to take the time that they need so they can do their jobs appropriately.
Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien.
I have a question. Are these employees in the Group 2 pension system?
Group 1.
They're Group 1?
Is that correct, Bill? Yeah, Group 1.
Okay. Because I was led to believe the reason that you do have the accrual when you go to retire was supposed to, within the Group 2 system for some, the state has changed it and it is a 2-tier system, but was to enhance, some of the money. And that goes retro way back when they used to not pay us as well, at the time with the salary and everything. And if I can have a follow-up too, when you give your answer. Are these employees, if they call in sick, are they replaced?
No, these employees are not replaced. However, losing an attorney at the courthouse on the day creates double the work for other people there. So the caseload still has to be managed, but we don't have people to replace them. And to answer your first question, if I may, Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
I think if I understand your statement correctly, the people in this that are affected, which are the 8 people that have been hired more recently, are all hired at a time when they had changed. So their money wouldn't go towards, their buyout doesn't go toward the retirement package. It got separated. So these people, the payment that they're given for the sick time do not go toward their retirement, if I understand what you're saying correctly. Because they were hired later, so they fell under after the changes got made.
So if I follow.
Follow up, Alderman.
So there is somewhat of a cost savings, because if you're in the uniform force, if an officer called in sick, you have to replace him with another officer
Correct.
in shift coverage.
Correct.
So if this particular attorney or whatever the designated position is, it goes vacant, so it's just a loss of, it comes out of his 720 hours that he, whatever he has accrued at the particular time.
Correct.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Oh,
Not to the retirement. There is an additional thing which I don't think has been mentioned, but there is an educational incentive added here as well, which for a person with a bachelor's is $1,000, probably the most common. Master's 1250. So that is an additional 1.5% or 2% of pay right there in year one. So yeah, there's a 2.25 increase, but really it's more like 4 when you include the educational incentive.
Pardon,
Alderman Clean, as far as,
I just actually want to make a statement, and I know that the public is listening, and that's more of why I want to make the statement. One of the things of working in accounting, where I used to work, the cost of sick leave at the time that you're earning it, versus when you get it at the end, is usually a higher rate, because when you're paying the sick leave, if I'm not correct, you're paying it not at their average salary rate, but whatever it was that they retired at, correct?
Correct.
So if they've accumulated all those hours up to the 720, it's based on that current and not,
Current salary.
right. It would be impossible to try to figure that out. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified. So it's actually costing a higher amount by paying it at the end versus if they were using it throughout
Correct.
their career. Okay.
Alderman Clemens, did you have something?
I'm just surprised at the last comment that the mayor made. I would think that we would want to incentivize our employees to become more educated in their fields, and hold a higher degree by advancing themselves. And yeah, they should be paid for that because school is expensive. And you know, I'm in the benefit right now of contemplating going back to school because luckily I work for MIT, so obviously it's a place that values education, so I get quite a good benefit to do that. But there's been other times in my life when it probably would have been better for me to go back to school, but I had no incentive to do it. It's, you know, my salary wouldn't increase or I wouldn't get any benefits to doing that. And so it was just a $25,000 expense. Yes, I would be more educated, but what am I going to get out of it? I feel like we should be encouraging people to get their education. And I was just surprised by that comment. That's all.
But remember
Alderman
that,
Mayor?
we've heard the example of the lawyers, right? Now, to get the job, you have to have a law degree. Now, this contract says if you have a master's, which is a law degree, is more than that, you get $1,250. So I get the point. We want people to become more educated. But if the job requires that you have a master's and then you get a bonus after you've been hired for having a master's, you needed that to get the job to begin with. And that's why you're paid a higher wage to start. Same with bachelors. So, I mean, it's not, I just thought you should know about that provision. I mean, my biggest objection is the retirement, which, for the reasons I already expressed.
Commissioner Tolan, and by the way, could you just put your light up? It bothers the cameras. There you go.
I'll turn it off. So on the education piece, I'm glad to hear that because that was probably one of the easiest topics of conversation. We want, regardless of whether it's police, fire, teachers, employees working at City Hall, you want the best educated employees that over the course of their tenure with the city, and hopefully it's a long time, that they have a good, solid education that will provide them the opportunities to make sound decisions that in the future will save the city thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases. So it's an insignificant item as far as a cost item. The other thing is, some of these positions are going to be hard to, attract future candidates. To get those 2 lawyers to come in was not an easy task. I mean, we had a number of meetings on this and trying to figure out how we could, work this in. So on this particular piece, I think that conversation amongst the commissioners and others at the police department, that was an easy one because I think the citizens and the department as a whole would benefit from that particular component. Thank you.
Any Alderman O'Brien.
Yeah, in listening to the conversation, I really didn't know where I was gonna go with this. I understand both sides. The mayor is saying that he has the, concerns, and, for the employees and to be fairness to at all that work within the city. And the chief brings up a good valid point that he wants to be concerned and make it even out the playing field for everybody within his department, which highlights to me that I think our system is in jeopardy or something like that that is happening across the board with all unions. It seems, we do have people that look over from one department to the other department. What are they getting? There's a group right now that is tied up in negotiations and everything. And maybe we should probably have, after this vote here, probably entertain a discussion to look at where we're going as a city, to look at all unions and to come up. What is the base sick time? What is this? And to make those, type of conversations easier than the debating, because right now where somebody might get something better and somebody didn't. And this is always going to happen. It's going to happen years in the future unless we lasso this bull, So I think regardless of the vote, I would just like to have, start thinking about having a general conversation where we're going to go with issues like this in the future. Thank you.
So, anyone else? The motion on the floor actually was to approve the amended R-18-102 as was described by the chief. The way this works for those that are fairly new, this committee will vote. If it's in a positive vote, the motion goes, the resolution goes forward to the full board. If the vote is no, then it goes back to the union and the negotiating team.
That's incorrect, Mr.
No?
Chairman. It would still go on to the full board, and the full board would get a chance to
I'm
vote
sorry,
for it,
you're right, you're right,
regardless
yeah,
of the
yeah.
recommendation of the
So
committee.
then we'd go forward to the full board without a recommendation from the, without a negative recommendation if it fails. So just wanted to point that out. At the full board level, if it doesn't pass, it goes back. Okay. Got one step ahead of myself. All right, if there's nothing else,
Is this the motion to amend?
the motion is to amend. That's the first motion. And the motion is, that amendment is on the floor. All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. We are now addressing the amended R-18-102 for recommendation to the full board of approval of the contract as amended. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So the motion will go forward with a positive recommendation from the Budget Committee to the full board. I don't think it would be on next, I guess it does have to be on next Tuesday because of the time we have to respond, right? 30 days from the time we got it? Going to the
Originally got it
Corporation
a
Council?
long time ago, but the sooner the better.
All right. So we have a legal ruling on that?
I think our risk is slight, because I
Okay.
think the union would accommodate a 2-week delay if necessary. They've patiently waited this long.
So if it's not on next Tuesdays, it would be 2 weeks from Tuesday. All right. Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate all you do and keeping the city safe.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item to take off the table is our 19-154. Is there a motion to take our 19-154, establishing an expendable trust fund for appropriations for parking-related expenditures off the table?
So moved.
So moved by Alderman Clemmons. The motion on the floor is to take R 19-154 off the table. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We will now address R 19-154.
Now, you'd asked me, I think, Mr. Chair, to come in and explain what this is all about.
Yes,
Which
and
is
did you want to
one-
also bring up
Yeah, why doesn't Mr. Cummings come forward as well?
parking guru?
Would you like me to proceed?
Yeah, certainly.
So Director Cummings has done a great job with this whole parking thing. What previously, and again, the police department has many other priorities, opioids and everything else. Their focus had never been, their primary focus had never been on the parking enforcement. So when this was changed to the Economic Development Department, the parking tickets enforcement was operating at a growing deficit. So believe it or not, the cost of issuing the tickets exceeded the amount that was being brought in. And that deficit was growing. It had been 40 or 50, but it looked like there was a projected deficit that it would go to somewhere between 50 and 100. So the function was transferred to economic development, and Director Cummings has done a great job in mostly not in issuing more tickets, but in reducing the cost of issuing the tickets. In reducing the cost. So the revenues have not increased much, but he could probably explain more, give you more detail. But the expenses have been reduced to the point where we are now operating at 100,000 or more in surplus every year. Expenses have been reduced, and people and therefore there's now money available being generated, a positive rather than a negative deficit. There's money actually being generated by the parking enforcement. But we do have an asset or assets downtown where we need additional investment, and those are, well, the parking garages and the parking function in general. Now, the parking garages were built some time ago. The High Street garage, which is 400 and some spaces, was built, I think, in 1977, 78, maybe 79, right in there. So 40 years old. And the Elm Street garage was built in about 1985, so going on 35 years old. And they need to be evaluated in terms of their integrity, the structure of them, what they needs to be evaluated, what repairs they might need, what improvements should be made to maintain the garages. Very little has been spent on those garages over those many decades. There is some need for an additional space here in City Hall, and the parking function would work better were it located in the garage. So we'd like to just upgrade the office over at the Elm Street so the parking function could move into the garage. I think would also, in addition to making it more accessible to the public, would give a greater sense of security in the Elm Street garage, just having people around at various times. And so what this resolution would do, it would be to create an expendable trust fund so that the money, the surplus generated through this parking enforcement would be used for the garages and to enhance the parking in general. When we need new meters, when we need a new machine, when we need to do immediately an engineering, for example, an evaluation of the garages. When anything is required, we will have a dedicated source of revenue. Now, if the money is not used, if it's not necessary, at any time, the city, the Board of Aldermen, from an expendable trust fund like this can transfer money out. Like if it built up a bunch of money which wasn't needed, we could use the money for something else. But this proposes that the funds generated by the parking function go back into the parking enforcement function, go back to into the garages and the other parking lots. One final note, this does not affect the parking meter and leased parking revenues. Right now, those go into, those go, the first $728,000 of that amount goes to city revenue, but beyond the 728, and that number was established when the Downtown Improvement Committee, I think, was established. Alderman Clemens was very involved. Anything above 728 goes to the Downtown Improvement Committee for downtown improvements in general. This would not affect that system at all. This is a different source of revenue, those being the parking tickets, and the source and the benefit, the use of the funds would be on the garages and the parking lots, separate from what the Downtown Improvement Committee does. So that's the basic case.
Question?
Yep.
Oh. Alderman Wilshire?
I have a question about the resolution that we have coming before us on Tuesday night for student parking at the library. How does this affect that? Or how does that affect this?
Mr. Cummings?
So if I may, for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. So that would go into more into the Downtown Improvement Committee accounting, if you will, because that is leased parking and meter type of revenue, whereas the revenue that would come from this type of accounting is going to be coming from parking enforcement. And parking enforcement is citations of tickets or blocked driveways or things of that nature. That is a separate amount of money that isn't the Downtown Improvement Committee. So that really doesn't get involved with this per se.
Thank you.
All set? Alderman Clemens?
So the money that we raise on the tickets, mostly, well, they can come from any part of the city, is that correct?
Correct.
So theoretically, this doesn't all have to be used downtown. This could be if we wanted to, I don't know, if the city had some other infrastructure or something that had to do with parking somewhere else, like say at a school or, like I know Mount Pleasant, we had, a few years ago, we had to redesign the way that whole intersection is and, create one-ways and all this stuff. And so, if a project like that came up, I would suppose that this money could be used for that, seeing as how the main issue in that particular thing was related to the fact that people were parking to pick up their kids and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering how broad of a fund this is and where it could go, I guess is what I'm wondering.
Director Cummings? Oh,
The way it's expressed is parking related expenses. So I think you could make you could say, if we wanted to do that or extend the overnight program to another neighborhood, and we wanted to use the money to paint the lines or put up the signs or whatever, it's a parking related expense. So I think we could use it for anything and the expenditures would still need to be approved by the Board of Aldermen. I mean, this does not give authority to the Economic Development Director or the mayor to actually spend the money. It just says we're going to save the money for this purpose, and we come back to the Board of Aldermen to propose how the money would be spent or allocated.
okay. Director Cummings, you want to answer what you had
Sure,
before?
yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the mayor actually answered it as how I would, and I want to make clear, it's very broad in terms of for parking related operations, enforcement type of infrastructure type of expenses, and it would be citywide. So I just want to make that abundantly clear.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you. No, because I had some people reach out to me and they were concerned because they said, is this another fund for downtown, basically, is what the person said. And so, I said, I don't think so, but I went and I, reread the language and everything, and I thought of that example of the Mount Pleasant situation, just because I was a little involved in that. And so, yeah, so I think this is good. I like the fact that if there are other things that come up around the city and there are other areas that we can tap into this as well, because remember, the people get tickets for parking in the snow and for overnight parking and stuff like that in different areas of the city. And if we have a problem area or something like that that needs to be addressed, then and it's going to require some money, then this would be a good place to go for that. So.
Director Cummings.
Thank you. So if I may, again, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. A few weeks back, I was asked explicitly, what type of uses of funds that would occur if we went forward in this direction. And a good example that I could give you, and one I wanted to kind of just bring to the group's attention this evening, and this also happens to be outside of the downtown. The city in a few months is going to be taking back the control of a parking lot in the mill yard itself explicitly. And I can tell you now, come the first of the year, there's going to be some expenses to that. In the ideal scenario, I think I would be looking to recommend putting in a gate system of some sort or controlling it in that way, and making sure we make improvements in that parking lot, which we haven't had control over the last 5 years. And if I could know that this type of fund is available to make those improvements, and I can tell you confidently that it's not coming off of the property tax base or the general fund, we'll be using it for these types of related expenses. That is one explicit example I wanted to give. Another one I've heard time and time again, this one happens to be more of a downtown related item, but it's infrastructure, parking related, lighting in the garage is of grave concern, and I've heard it time and time again. But there's a lot of priorities here in this city, and I understand that. And so if I know that we could use it to improve the infrastructure in the garages by adding that additional lighting, this would be the source of funds that we would be looking at. So anyway, I wanted to come before you this evening, give you those very explicit examples, as well as note is, and I put this in the memo, is it would also give us an opportunity to set aside some money for increasing additional parking supply, where maybe we are looking to have more communal parking, either in the downtown or outside. We can have a source of funds to be able to do that. That again wouldn't be off of the property tax base.
Anyone else? Alderman Schmidt.
Thank you. In support of the last comment you made about, you hear about this quite often from all over the city. Ward 1, one of the major complaints is that it's very hard to park downtown. And I think it's because they find it very hard to use the parking garages. People who live out in the boonies really don't know parking garages, and they're a pain and they're dark. I've had people say that they were accosted there, that they didn't feel safe. And the elevator was broken. That's the kind of thing you hear from people who live outside the center of the city. And if those things could be addressed, it would be really a great idea.
Other comments, questions? All right, the motion on the floor.
Yes, you haven't yet. Can I make a motion for final passage?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Oh, I would like.
Where you go?
Well, I thought he did. A motion for final passage. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Motion on the floor is for final passage of R 19-154, establishing an expendable trust fund for appropriations for parking-related expenditures. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is R 19-154.
I think that's the last item that I have, Mr. Chair, so thank you very much.
Not
Unless you have
exactly.
questions about this next one, but
The next one has to do, was looking for It was tabled pending the BPW recommendation, since you're the chair of that
Was
particular
positive.
committee?
All it does is it says that out of these revenue funds, various mine falls, skateboard park, Holman, et cetera, that the Director of Public Works can authorize an expenditure rather than a vote of the Board of Public Works. And the Board of Public Works favors that approach. So
Okay,
they voted in favor of it. I think it was unanimous.
yeah. Now you can go.
I'm not sure of that, but definitely a clear majority. All right, anyway, thank you very much.
All right. I need a motion to take our 19157 off the table.
Make a motion for final passage.
No, off the table first.
Oh, excuse me. Make the motion for off the table?
Motion is to take our 19157 off the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now I would like to make the motion for final passage.
Motion on the floor is for final passage of our 19157, changing the agent to expend on certain expendable trust funds administered by the Parks and Recreation Department, and it comes with a favorable recommendation from the BPW Board of Directors. Questions? None? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. General discussion. Alderman Clee.
I'd just like to comment that when you did the roll call, both myself and Alderman Lopez were here, and you didn't make note of it for the record. So I'd just like to
Okay, yeah.
get that entered into the record.
I'm kind of working off a different agenda, but thank you.
And
All right.
if I could just kind of make one comment about, I know we talked about the taxes and putting money in, keeping it under 3%. I've recently been, because of some of the credits and so on that I have to look at from the state level, I've been looking at tax rates, and I've been looking at services that they get for the tax rate. And why Hollis seems to, a very wealthy community, seems to have what some people call a lower tax rate and so on. They also don't have all the services I asked. They do not have, I keep saying running water, but they don't have city water. They don't have city water. They don't have storage. They don't have trash pickup. They do have fire, and they do have police. But these are things that we think of all the time. They have to bring their trash to one location. They have to bring their recycles to another location. They have to bring their yard waste to another location. And we have the privilege of having them picked up at our home. So you get what you pay for, hopefully, and you pay what you get. So I just wanted to kind of get that out there.
Thank you. Any other general discussion? Oh, Alderman Wiltshire.
Thank you. So there's been some discussion between mostly Sue Lovering and Kim Kleiner about renovations to this chamber. Brian McCarthy and I had been discussing this for the last 10 years. I mean, really. I think the last time this chamber was updated at all was when Suzanne Franks did it, probably 18 years ago, maybe more.
Approximately that. And that really amounted to paint.
Paint, right, because these desks are from, I believe, 1927. We
And the
could
cameras, too?
donate one of them to the Historic Society or the Smithsonian or someone. But so the problem in here is lighting, sound. I mean, there's better quality sound and lighting up in the auditorium, and we spend 4 nights a week in here. The desks are, you know, the wiring and everything is pretty much shot. I mean, you remember a few years back when Alderman Moriarty's light sent out sparks and thought it was going to catch fire, and yeah, yeah, it was kind of crazy. So let me just tell you what we've been talking about. We've been talking about money that's available in C-tab for the electronics in here. It's not money that we'd have to take out of the budget. There is also money that's in the building fund that I think the mayor put an extra 330,000 in this year, tonight.
310.
310,000, and I think there was already 200,000 in there. So we talked about tapping into some of that money. I just wanted to let the board know that this is what we're talking about. You know, it's, I think, long overdue. But,
I think for a reasonable amount of money, we could get an architect to give us some conceptual ideas of what could be done, and then we'd have a better idea of what we want to proceed forward with. I always believe if you have a plan, things go a lot better than haphazard, so.
okay, well, the other piece too is we've been, well, Ms. Lovering has been putting money aside every year in escrow, so I think we're up to about almost $40,000 there. Plus the money from CTAB, plus the 8,900 that was escrowed this year. It's something. Just wanted to let you know that we are in discussion phases of that.
Much as these are antiques and probably belong to the Historical Society, if you look at most towns and cities, they've always updated their chambers to be much more functional and appropriate for the times, so. Anyone else want to comment on that? Oh, yes, Alderman Clement.
Maybe if these things are so valuable, we can
Sell
have,
'em.
we can do an auction or something that'll defer the
Oh,
costs. Anybody
everybody,
can come in and bid on them.
Maybe
you know?
former alderman and president of the boards would like to buy one and put it in their house.
Yeah, maybe, you never know. I think, maybe Mr. T-Boom would want one.
Make a nice bar.
Okay, any other general discussion? Oh, you had your shot. No, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on this, that the complaints that I get from the outside are the viewing and the cameras and so on. And there are a lot of people that follow these meetings, and they can't hear, and one of the things they can't hear is even when someone speaks from the chamber. So I think we do need to get them to come up to the mic more often and so on, but it's difficult to hear.
The other thing is, the seats that are out there for the people that come to enjoy our meetings are less than comfortable.
Oh, yeah.
My husband was not happy.
Okay, any other, Alderman O'Brien?
Yes, thank you. I would just like to say, and probably for the people at home, evidently, and I don't know when they renovated, was probably 1927 when they put us on this side, but for historical facts, that is why that is recessed with the city seal up above. I wish we could get back over there. That's why the offices were there, because it was close proximity to the dais. But I don't know if it could be done with since they did the addition to City Hall, we have a main concourse that kind of went through where the actual railing was. I'd like to get back over there just for historical value, but I'll let the committee decide that as you work.
That's why you need an architect.
You know.
Okay, if there are no other general comments, public comment.
Fred T-Boom, 24 Cheyenne. Well, I may pick up 3 of these on auction, put them in my kitchen. My kitchen, have my own meetings.
We'll set you up with a TV camera.
In fact, these cameras and the audio and the chairs were changed not too many years ago. Barker was the IT manager, and he put in the cameras and he put in all new audio equipment, just in case you wanted to know. Well, what I want to talk about briefly is, as you know, the spending cap got voted down in the Supreme Court by a vote of 3-2. Split vote. We're now trying to get one of the Supreme Court justices to change his mind. Have a reconsideration motion in. Because I think their reading of the law was an atrocity. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about is the spending. Now the spending cap is gone. It looks like spending, and more spending. Just to now, I would have gotten here before the meeting, but I couldn't make it in time. Just to recap, $3.1 million in undesignated escrows. Many items that the mayor didn't mention, like $255,000 for consulting services. That money should have gone to unassigned fund balance. In fact, how many people here know it other than Bolton and Dowd and Griffin know what unassigned fund balance is? Probably don't even know what it is. But that is a savings account that the city keeps, the bond counselors like, because the city has a AAA rating that today is $29 million. That's basically a rainy day fund that the alderman can use when there's emergency spending necessary. But you got to maintain that account. And sure, when the Democrats come in, they love to spend these rainy day funds. $3.1 million in undesignated escrows that should have gone to savings, not on $255,000 for consultants, as an example. $4.5 million in unanticipated revenues. I'm talking about resolutions you recommended tonight are 163, 64, 67, 68, and 69. $4.5 million. Just about all of that should have gone to unassigned fund balance. $2 million in assigned fund balance is being transferred. That's an assigned savings account. And you heard the mayor say he's going to recommend $4.5 million in tax offset. That adds up to $14.1 million out of the unassigned fund balance. And you got a calculation from CFO Griffin. I wrote to CFO Griffin. I said, I don't agree with your calculation. And I sent you all a copy, of course, I don't know if you read it. The CFO Griffin, in quoting an ordinance that you probably don't even know exists, 135A, it is the policy of the Board of Aldermen to maintain an undesignated general fund balance as of each June 30th equal to 10% of the municipality's fiscal year appropriation. Plus, and a bunch of other stuff that nobody's really, plus a statewide enhanced education, plus school tax nexus commitments, and plus county appropriations. And what does that calculation use? Griffin doesn't use 10% of the municipality's fiscal year appropriation. He uses 10% of the general fund appropriations. That's a considerable difference. Last year, the total appropriations was $317 million. It's right in your budget book, right in front. The general fund appropriations were $270 million. So 10% of $270 million is $27 million that Griffin uses. The 10% he should use is $31 million. There's nothing in this ordinance that says use the general fund appropriation. Now notice, I watched a piece on television that said, you said, CFO Griffin, as has been commonly done. I can tell you, years ago, and that's something to do with that, we used the full appropriations. We didn't play games and manipulated financial accounting to try to shoehorn. Also, to get all of this money out and stay and still and spend and still stay within the so-called fund balance, he first adds to the fund balance $5.5 million of surplus, which is both the designated and undesignated escrow. And then he subtracts it. So he's saying, gee, our fund balance is really 29.9 million, 29 million, it's really 34.5 million. That's a sleight of hand that only financial accountants would like. But it doesn't pass the scrutiny test of what was this ordinance intended to be. The ordinance says 10% of full appropriations, not part of the appropriations. So here you have all this spending, and I think Alderman Clemens tried to blame it on the spending cap, that now we can spend. But guess what? It still takes 10 votes. Why does it take 10 votes to pass these in the full board? Nobody talked about that. 10 votes because you're supplementing the adopted budget of 2020. Another sneaky way to spend money. So, with all this money spent and $4.5 million drawn down with a resolution being introduced tomorrow, 4.5 million for tax offset, that represents about 2% of the tax rate, otherwise the tax rate would be 5%. What's going to be left in the fund balance? Nobody asked that question. Nobody here asked that question. You made a calculation that's patently unsound, and nobody asked that question. I didn't expect anybody to ask that question because I don't think you understand this kind of accounting. But I did want to speak, and that includes Alderman Clemens. And I did want to speak to this subject because there's no citizen here. Now, most citizens don't understand this stuff. There used to be aldermen here, David Dean, the fellow that passed away, myself, Cookson, some others, that understood this kind of stuff. Nobody understands it. You just spend. You basically become rubber stamps to the mayor. And I resent it. And I hope several of you will not get reelected in November. Thank you.
Alderman Clemens?
Thank you. May
Brett, remarks to the alderman, sir.
I ask a question to CFO Griffin?
Sure.
My question is, the ordinance that the speaker of the public was speaking about, has that ever been interpreted a different way than the way that you interpreted it this year?
No, Alderman Clemens, but if I may, John Griffin, CFO. I've been here since August 23rd, 2010, I'm not counting. I was trained by Mike Gilbar, who's as professional as they come. I went back and researched some of these ordinances that were changed, and as I mentioned, right out of the gate in Mayor Lozo's tenure, they increased the percentage from kind of a complicated thing to 10%. But as Mr. T-Boom clearly points out, they didn't change the denominator. And when I got here, I go, this is kind of ludicrous for the city of Nashua, because what he's talking about is current year appropriations plus net local spending, which is probably a town thing. We have it all in the budget, right? Then you want to add the county tax, you can make an argument at 16 million, you add it, take 10% of it. And finally, revenue. So there's two revenue sources and two appropriation sources that create the denominator. So when I get here and I'm trained by Mr. Gilbar under the leadership of Mayor Lozo, and you know how she was like, I'm 11.6%. I'm going to take my unassigned fund balance, I'm going to add my 1.5 million of that overlay kind of appropriation. And that's why I've always every year come to you folks and said, you're at 11.6. The rating agencies understand it, the bond councils understand it, the attorneys understand it. With what was just described, I wouldn't be here. I'd be probably terminated, because I have CAFRs, comprehensive annual financial reports, annually that show the unassigned fund balance growing. As Mr. T-Boone points out, it's 29 million and growing. We're going to come back a week from Monday and explain that it's going to grow 750,000 based on the calculations that we went over tonight. And never got a phone call, never got an email explaining it. As a matter of fact, I went through this for a month's worth of emails 2 years ago. So the point is, professionally run, AAA rated, what we tell you is what it is. So I appreciate the opportunity from your question to kind of defend myself and my teams, but there's no funny business going on. There's no misrepresentation, and you're going to end up with a fund balance that's unassigned fund balance, 750,000 more than it was last year, plus or minus, because we go through the final closeout. But in addition to that, we saved with your collective guidance and advice, we saved $4.5 million in assigned fund balance for future liabilities. Now, 3 years ago, if we were here, we're talking about pensions. Now we're talking about health care. So I recommended to the mayor, don't use fiscal 19 fund balance, use fiscal 20 fund balance, assigned fund balance. So that's where the 2 million comes from. The rest of it is the summation of $3.2 million of appropriations not spent, plus or minus. We're going to move those into the savings accounts that the mayor talked about. Then we're going to take from the 9.75 million, we're going to take 4.5 of revenue unanticipated as appropriated. And what we're left with is 525,000, of which 450,000 we're going to apply against the tax rate. So the math works. But for some reason, and I wasn't here back in '08, but the denominator for this in that ordinance probably needs to be revisited, because when I got here 2 years later, it's take, Mike Gilbar, remember like it was yesterday, you take the appropriations for the year, general fund, multiply it by 10%. Now, when you add the other things in, special revenue funds, no question about it, total appropriation, special revenue funds, wastewater funds, et cetera. Why do you have a savings account? You have a savings account because you might have to spend it. Wastewater has its own funding source. Special revenue funds, if all of a sudden the federal government doesn't pay the cafeteria program that we have, you're not going to have it. Unless you come back here and appropriate more money to pay. So what you're trying to do with the 10%, and I think our forefathers, you know, the Alderman Deans and Alderman McCarthy, those folks, they're like, let's get a 10% number. Let's be better than the state, right? Let's go 10%. And we've always prided ourselves on that undesignated fund balance. Used to be called, well, it's unassigned. It used to be undesignated. The rest of the things that we talked about tonight, the approval of the fund that we can actually spend money on for parking, is very similar to the revenues come in that are appropriated for Holman Stadium, David Dean Skate Park, and Mine Falls, right? Great. We have the Downtown Improvement Committee. That's where that money gets. So the fact that Mr. Cummings and his team turned this thing around from this traffic violation fund to now a budgeted parking enforcement, because that's what it's called. It's not traffic violation. No one's driving. It's parking, right? So all of that together leads me to believe that we had a very good meeting tonight. We're going to come back here a week from Monday, and hopefully you folks will agree with the mayor's proposal to put 4.5 against the tax rate. We'll come under 3, not 3, it's 2.99 something, but we might do better than that, because with revenues since we last spoke have exceeded expectations. Then it's a choice, you know. So that's kind of, I appreciate you asking a question, but that's where you're at. So you probably can go home tonight, and I know the football game's on and so forth, but you can sleep well, because we get you were here last year when we talked about the CAFR, we get unmodified opinions. We don't have, I've been with some towns and cities where you have a list of 10 or 12 things that they try to do a better job. So all of that stuff, that's why we come, why we present, all of that stuff will give you a very warm feeling that fiscally we're in good shape, and we intend to keep it that way. So thank you. Thank you for letting me speak.
That wasn't enough of an explanation.
Well, no, I want to say, and I want to say, I have full confidence in you and your team, because when I was here previously, you did a great job, and that was under a Republican mayor. You're here now under a Democratic mayor doing a great job, and I hope that you continue to serve this city well for as long as you want until you're ready to retire, and may that be far in the future, because we are served well. And I understand, and I also want to just address.
20% of the.
But I also just want to say that that you know, you've always explained things well, and although I understand a lot of the financial terms because that's what I do for a living, it is wonderful that you have a team, that you and your team can explain that to everybody. But I always say the proof is in the pudding. And you don't get a AAA bond rating by just being a rubber stamp for the mayor. You just don't. So, thank you, Mr. Griffin.
Anyone else? Aldermanic comments? Alderman Wiltshire?
I just want to say well said, Alderman Clemmons, and thank you, Mr. Griffin.
You're welcome.
Alderman Clee?
I was going to ask a very similar question, but thank you. And I never do this, but I have to tell you that sitting here, even though I'm not a member, to have someone sit there and say, I'm sure you don't know what this is, and I'm sure you don't know what this is quite insulting. Because I think we all, on this board and around this horseshoe, take the time to learn. And while we can't all be experts, and yes, maybe sometimes we don't know something, I believe in someone's freedom of speech, but I think there has to draw a line. And the fact that things got political, and we're talked about elections, and I hope they don't get reelected and so on, I think that was uncalled for and it doesn't belong here. And I think that, again, freedom of speech, I'm not going to say anything of that nature, but I don't think that we talk Democrat, I don't think we talk Republican, I don't think we talk Libertarian here. I think we're all open-minded, and none of us have rubber stamped. Alderman Clemmons likes to be the naysayer of the group and has a tendency to, as does Alderman Jettie, as did I when it came to the chicken ordinance and so on. We have opposed. We even overturned one of the mayor's requests when it came to that retirement. So I think we're like-minded because we want what's best for the city and not because we're rubber stamps. And I do find that very infuriating and very insulting. Thank you.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned at 9:27 PM. Thank you, John.